I had to first realize what I was doing that was giving you a negative about me, that I didn't love
Perception, yeah.
you or had no care about you. That for me was hard. I'm like, oh, how could that even happen? But I had to look at myself. Well, how have I been responding? How have I been available? How have I nurtured this relationship? Especially we're family, and to me, a family is should be a close relationship. I know it's not for everybody, and I'm still working on some of those areas of my family that have kind of slipped away. But I desire to have that closeness again. So that was the first thing, and that was me, because I get to control how I respond to my family members, the people that God has put around my life, my friends, my neighbors, whatever. So that's just about me. I can't expect everyone else to change so that
Right.
I can like them or interact with them or whatever. So that was the first thing, was figuring out how I was putting off a vibe that was not approachable. And that was hard for me to realize. Hey, everybody. Hey.
How's it going? I'm gonna fix this real quick.
There
There
we
we
go.
go.
I hate change, so good call on that.
I know.
But
I was like, if I didn't put our names under there already, it would have been fine.
that's awesome. That's
For folks,
awesome.
for folks who are just listening, we just kind of came on the screen in different positions than what we're used to. So we're like, what do we do?
I know. It's like, no, it can't be different.
I know we didn't even talk about who was going to kick us off
I
as far
know.
as like introducing ourselves. Did you want to do that today, or?
It doesn't matter. You guys all know me. I'm Tina Frank, and I'm your conservative Christian. I guess I'm a mature conservative Christian woman.
Hi, everyone, and I'm Bonnie Violet, a transgender queer drag queen living in San Francisco at the moment.
Awesome.
You are at Splintered Grace.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Sorry for the crazy start, but hey, this is real. This is who we are.
Right? It's the reality of it all.
Yeah. Anyway, so hey, we decided this week we want to talk about fear. So let's go. What do we think?
Just dive right in, huh? So we also like to participate with folks. So if you're able to participate, we'd love for you to hear what you have to say about fear, what your experience is. We're going to talk about, I think, defining what fear really is. And so if you have a definition or something you'd like to share about what fear is, that would be great.
Yeah. You keep in mind, fear comes in all shapes and sizes, and that fears change as our seasons change. So we just want to engage with you guys a little bit. Right now, especially, I know that fear is real for all of us in some capacity or another. So let's just have an open conversation about it. Mm-hmm. So what do you think fear means?
Well, I had some, like, in some of the circles I've been in, I've come across these, is it acronyms for fear?
Oh, yeah.
That I thought were kind of good. There's one that's called, or one that is false evidence appearing real, is fear.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I've heard is F everything and run.
I've not heard that one.
Right. Charlie says hello.
Oh, hey, Charlie. Good that you could log in this morning.
Yes. Glad you could join us. We're talking about fear. It's an exciting, I guess, topic, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like trying to think, how would I define fear? Like, actually, like, what does fear mean? Like,
yeah. I'm not sure that there's really a definition, at least not that I have found. It's anything that makes your heart race or makes you uncomfortable, I would think. And it can be defined by lots of different things. We were talking before when we were little. I know I was scared of the dark. That was a very real fear, although my friends thought I was silly. My parents would roll their eyes. Oh, come on, you need the light on to sleep. But it was a genuine fear.
I've been afraid of the dark most of my life. Like I still, I've been afraid of the dark. I got to be a little bit better at it, but a few months ago, I started being scared in the dark again. I actually started being really afraid of, like, in a lot of fear when I was in the dark in my room for whatever reason. And it was wild. So I started sleeping with my door open and my light on, because those are things that I would do to kind of, I guess, sleep when I was dealing with fear. Fear in the night. I just actually started sleeping without a light on again, like a few days ago. So, So yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but that was there for me. Christine has a comment. She said, "LOL about the acronyms." I've also read recently that anxiety, closely related, is just conspiracy theories you make up about yourself.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's the idea, I mean, a lot of the times, and I think especially like when we're thinking about like spirituality, and we're thinking about, like, for us, people who have a connection with God or an understanding of God, it's like in reality, we should have nothing to be afraid of. Right. So I think that kind of makes the idea that if we're afraid of something, then, that's not real. That's not true. That's fake news. It's
right. Well, Christine brings up an interesting point. Is anxiety and fear the same?
I think they're closely related. I think maybe anxiety could be how it manifests, maybe like fear. Fear can like what happens when somebody is afraid. Maybe anxiety is something they feel. Also, I think anger is very closely related to fear. I definitely
fear to fear. Yeah.
Yeah. Like angry is kind of an outward expression of fear. But I think also anxiety can probably cause fear as well.
Yeah. That's I was thinking too. That's a twofold anxiety. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's why they're closely related. And I'm wondering I don't know if all anxiety is fear and all fear has anxiety, but.
Oh. I think that you're right. They're close cousins, because I know I was just thinking as Christine was sharing, I deal with anxiety, but it's about usually my schedule, which is funny right now because I don't have a whole lot of stuff on my schedule. Not like that I would be anxious about it. But if I start to get behind the curve on the schedule that I want to keep, I find myself getting anxious. And that's an anxiety that I put on myself that I guess stimulates a fear that I'm going to be late for something, I'm going to miss something, or I don't know what. But so that's interesting that Christine brought that up, because I have to make a conscious effort. Okay, I'm not going to get anxious about this. It's fine. My schedule's fine. I'll be just fine. But I have to talk myself down sometimes because I get myself worked up.
Right. Because is it anxiety because you're afraid you're going to be late, you're not going to show up, you're going to miss something? And
I'm guessing.
Or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Charlie's been making some comments. I wanted to catch up that. She says, I struggle a lot with anxiety. So I definitely believe that it's true that they're so connected. The hardest thing for me is the fear and anxiety I see in my kids.
Mm-hmm. That's tough. What are your guys' thoughts on that? How do we respond to fear and anxiety that we see in the people that we love?
Yeah, I can even imagine what it would be like because I'm not a parent, but I think even not being a parent, I still I would have a lot of fear about if I did have a child, like how the world. Yeah, I just don't know. I'd feel like I needed to protect them, and then in reality, you can't really protect anyone from everything,
Right.
I think they feed off of my essence.
Off of your anxiety, Charlie, the anxiety that you have.
I think
that's true. I think that can be true. I've found that they see you stressed, so it makes them stressed. Yeah, I can see that. I know that I have over the years realized that my attitude or my response to things can dictate how other people around me respond.
Mm-hmm.
So if I come in all anxious and stressed out and whatever, then the other people around me will. And sometimes that sparks anger, I found. So you mentioned that earlier, it causes people to not feel safe or to feel like they have to respond in some way. And it brings out all types of different emotions. I think that's a good thought, Charlie.
It reminds me of when I remember like being around kids when I was younger, and a kid would be walking as they do when they're little toddlers, right? And they fall, and then if they fall and you're like, you freak out for them, then they start to freak out and cry. And usually the parents are like, stop it, knock it off. If you don't freak out, they won't freak out. They'll just brush it off and keep walking.
Yeah, it's true. It's really true. And some things just don't change. We just have to remember that. Don't freak out. That's easier said than done a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I would bring on that anxiety myself. I don't have anyone calling me saying, you're late. I don't have anyone calling me saying, oh, did you get this done or this or that? It's something I find that it's an expectation, I guess, would be a good way to put it. I have on myself that causes me to be anxious. And then that fear kicks in that I'm going to have a negative, whatever, be late or whatever. And
if you go dig deep into that, I'm sure it comes from somewhere, whether it's from our idea of needing to be productive, fear of what other people are thinking of us, fear of fear of not doing the things that we want to do before we die, or, there's so much that could be kind of feeding into that.
Yeah.
Christine says, I like the point that fear manifests sometimes as anger. So when parenting or caring for others, I look at the symptoms I might be seeing and try to have conversations that help them see the what is at the root. That way we can give ourselves and others grace as we react or process the core emotions surrounding our fears.
That's true.
Yeah, very well said. Very, very well said. And that takes some awareness. To be able to kind of it's because it can be hard when you're actually in that fear yourself. Seeing it in someone else too, it could cause you to, I don't know, sometimes you can get to a space where you can't see the forest among the trees.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't see the full picture because you're either caught up, you're just too into it, whether it's fear or you're trying to control it or, whatever.
Especially when you got anger involved. How many times have we just had someone be angry at us and we don't even know why? And so our response then sometimes can be anger back. And then thinking about it and thinking when we're angry back, that's just because we feel like we have to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's a whole mechanism called, and here's an underlying fear in all of this. But I think this is a fear that people struggle with, but I think there's a lot of other kinds of fears as well. What do you think?
Oh yeah, there's everything from little kind of teeny fears or fears that might seem it might seem smaller.
Yeah.
In comparison to other fears, and I feel like they're somewhat relative. They're personal and they're dependent upon kind of your experience. As in, not everybody is maybe afraid of spiders like you are, I believe.
Right?
Don't you have a fear of spiders?
No.
Oh, no?
No.
Do you have a fear of some creature?
Maybe snakes, but not spiders.
For some reason
lots of other things, but not that.
No,
I'm pretty being outside in the garden all the time. I've kind of overcome a lot of that whole be afraid of bug things.
Yeah,
I don't like scorpions either, but I'm not scared of them.
Right. Well, and that's something I'm sure you've gotten used to.
Yeah. It's because of where we live. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Some people are really afraid now. My daughter's scared of Jell-O.
Jell-O.
She's a grown up and she still is scared of Jell-O. It's crazy. I know people who are scared of balloons. So fear is a real thing, and it's just random. Things that don't make sense to us that other people are held hostage in, actually.
Yeah, I have a weird fear. Fear feels like a strong word, but reaction to cockroaches. Um, I never really like growing up. I was never exposed to cockroaches really either. It was actually until I moved to Arizona,
Yeah.
and one thing is they come up out of the sewers.
Yes, gross.
Where I used to work, and they're like, I don't know, like a cat size. I don't know. They're just like they're huge.
They are huge.
But I kind of thought all of the insects in Arizona were like so much bigger than what I grew up with. Like
That's so funny.
everything just seemed, the spiders seemed bigger, the bugs seemed bigger. But I had one time a cockroach. The thing that gets me about cockroaches is their texture, I guess. Like I had one crawl up on my foot when I was like at a urinal in the bathroom. And I remember just getting that feeling. And it's like, ever since then, like every time I see a cockroach, like even in a film or anywhere, I just kind of like go back to that.
Kind of cringe, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Gross. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
No fun. I'm not a fan of cockroaches. When I first moved out here, that was a hard adjustment. Now we're like everybody, we keep our spaces bug free with help of local bug people that come out and take care of our properties. But yeah. So anyway, no fears of that here.
Yeah. What is your biggest fear? Is that a lot to ask?
No, I'll share. I it's funny, all the things that when I was thinking about this week and our conversation, I was trying to, because I want to say that I'm fearless. I think we all have a desire to be fearless and just accomplish whatever it is that we want to accomplish every day. But when you really think about it, I do have some fears, the anxiety that I just shared already. But I don't know. I think I have a fear of being rejected. I think I've always had that from the time I was young. And I think that as I've grown up and become an adult and mature, even I might say, it's still there. It's different, and it takes on different things. And I feel like I still have fear of rejection because I want people to like me.
Yeah, that's a real fear that I think a lot of people.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people talk about. I know I have that fear a lot too, especially when it comes to my just identity and stuff, But I saw Angel has a great question. So Angel says, how does God define fear? Do we not instill fear on those who oppose the teachings of the Bible? How do we change that? What can we do to be more accepting and loving while still aligning ourselves with the image of God?
Great questions, Angel.
Very much.
I have to be honest. I don't have the scripture reference on how God defines fear, but I will say that anytime God showed up, he always said, fear not. Yeah. So from that, I'd have to assume that to be in the presence of God or to be pursuing the presence of God, there's peace. And, I feel bad for anyone who's dealt with a Christian, myself included, and that I made you feel fearful of the teachings of God, because God's teachings aren't fearful. They're not fearful at all. So if we want to be more accepting and loving by aligning ourselves with the image of God, then we need to be loving and kind. We need to go back to what we talked about last week about love and being able to love one another and to focus on those things that are amazing about one another instead of those things that we don't like. But I think rejection is a part of that. I think that hesitancy for people to reach out in any capacity, to reach out to someone to encourage them or to even be the one that's being reached out to, there's a vulnerability there that's required that could mean that we could be rejected. And so I think that's all a part of this process, is being able to reach out even though you're afraid you're going to be rejected, and then having to manage all that emotion, because it's an emotional thing to be rejected.
Yeah.
And manage it and manage that emotion. And for me as a Christian, and for you as a Christian, we line that up with who we are in Christ.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. And although I know that here, I don't always get that here in my heart. And I spend some time sometimes anxious because I've been rejected somehow.
Yeah.
One more thing, and I apologize to be long-winded, but sometimes I find that I feel like I'm being rejected when I'm really not being rejected.
Mm.
So that's something else that we need to have discernment about.
Hey y'all, it's me again, Bonnie Violet. I just wanted to take a second and thank my Patreon members. Patreon members are folks who contribute on a monthly basis anywhere from $3 to $150 a month to support the work of a queer chaplain. Big shout out to Victoria Thompson, Jason Brandt, Brandon Stanton, Kim Silva, Brandy McCarg, Randy Sandknott, Bob Kaiser, Joey Heckmeister, Violet Rhiannon, Gabriel, Jonathan, Petrick, and Todd Atkins Whitley. Thank you so much for your continued contributions. And if you're interested in joining the Patreon, just check the link in the description. Go to patreon.com/Bonnie Violet. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind for me is like, I like what you said about God saying, fear not. I think that that's probably like a response, like that could be our response to fear as, aligning ourselves with our image of God is this idea of like, I don't need to be afraid. I'm afraid. But I mean, I think fear it can help us. It can motivate us to put ourselves in better places. Sometimes though, it can cause us to make decisions that aren't the greatest because we're doing them out of, fear or urgency or just not in the right frame of mind. But I'll be real that I always think that's funny when people, and I'm going to say it, but when we say, well, to be honest, or can I be honest, or to be real, it's like, no, girl, we want you to lie to us. But
yeah.
But I caught myself saying that. But I'm afraid of falling short, even like, especially to God, and especially to my purpose and my calling and what it is I'm supposed to do in life with my life. I think that that's been a big fear of mine. I would say most of my life I've had that fear. And I would say that's probably still my biggest fear is that, and I wonder where that comes from, because there's a part of me that knows that I don't need to fear God in like loving me anyway, so to speak. But I still feel like there's a belief of me falling short or me needing to try to not go to hell, and I wonder what that, I don't know if that's something that, I learned growing up, that you do bad things, you go to hell, like it's a very generalized, like, thing that I feel like we learn as kids, or maybe younger in maturity, we might be able to, as we get older, realize that there's nuance and what we call bad isn't bad or, good, or I don't know. It's just, it's interesting because I still feel like a lot of what sometimes keeps me from moving forward, but also causes me to be more thoughtful about moving forward is, how would God want me to be in this situation? Am I living up to the potential, or am I selling myself short? Am I not, you know what I mean? Like, those are the sorts of things that I think still comes down for me. And it's interesting to still, I think I have a fear of not of God itself, but letting down God.
Yeah. I get that. But let me just encourage you. One, if you've asked Jesus into your heart to be your Lord and Savior, you're not going to go to hell. Now, there is a point of forgiveness that you have to be willing to forgive those around you. But at the end of the day, we're not going to get to heaven on works.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why God is grace. And I know you already know this, but for those of you who don't, God can't love you any more than he loves you today. It doesn't matter what you do, how you do it, how many times you do it. God can't love you any more than what he does right now in this moment. So our goal and our desire, and I understand your concern about falling short, because I don't want to miss God's plan for my life either. But I find great comfort in knowing that as long as I'm in pursuit of him, I'm good. I'm good. He's not going to ever, he doesn't have the ability to be disappointed in me, because I'm no surprise to him.
Mm-hmm.
He knew from the moment he conceived me that my potential good and my potential not good. And he said, okay, I'm gonna save you anyway.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah, I have a less belief in like heaven after death. Like, okay. I don't feel like I know that, right? Like, I don't feel like I don't know. I just don't feel super connected with that idea. Okay. But I do connect with the idea of creating, I guess in Christian terms, the kingdom, the kingdom on earth, or heaven on earth, or like creating it to some degree on earth. So I feel like I can experience heaven and hell on earth, because that's my experience, right? But I don't recall experiencing life after death. So it's like, I feel like that's what I feel like I've experienced in my own understanding of heaven and hell. And I believe in my own spirituality is that my role on this earth, to just kind of keep it general, is to leave it better than when I came into it. How am I going to affect the world in a more positive way to facilitate healing and collective lovingness? And you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's everyone's role, kind of, is to get us to that space of being able to be better with one another.
But I understand it. I'm not trying to be confrontational here, but how do you define better? Because I think that can be different for you and for me. My definition of better is going to be different than yours.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling is to be for life to be a less harmful experience for people. So like part of like trying to reduce trauma, fighting for the oppression, working toward having a more balanced and equitable living and life situation for folks, to where people aren't having different experiences because of their race, or because of their gender, or because of where they were born, or because of the education they have or they don't have. Like, to begin to try to create a space in which we all can exist in our difference, and it doesn't change our value, which in God's eyes, and my understanding of like sacred economy, we're all of the same value. I really believe in grace, and that understanding that also we don't have to earn our value, and we don't have to earn our worth. However, we live in a world that tells us that. We live in a world that says that you have to work hard, you have to pull yourself up from the bootstraps. If you're having a bad experience, it's because you're not doing it right. Or there's this idea that maybe if you come from a different space, you have to work really hard, and you have to work harder in order to kind of come up. So I think the world tells us that we have different value, and God tells us that we don't. And so I think part of what I feel like our role is to help people have that experience, come to know that while they're on earth, not after they die. Does that make sense?
I am tracking with you.
Yeah.
I believe that God wants us to experience him on earth. I believe that he wants us to live out our potential in each one of us. I believe all those things. I think that when we try to define what God meant for us, I think that's when things get jaded. And I feel like that culturally, people are defining these things on their own. and then creating spaces for people to band together and make it line up to their definition of that. And I think that's where we're having a lot of challenge. And we have to remember that God's economy works different than our economy.
Mm-hmm.
And God's economy doesn't take from one to give to the other.
Yeah.
God's economy is blessed, and he says that he provides for us, every single one of us. But here's where the provision comes. It comes according to his riches and glory, not ours. It has really nothing to do with the world that we live in tangibly. It has everything to do with the world that we choose to live in spiritually. And that's why we hear these amazing stories about people that are living in bondage that feel so free and at peace and can still love their neighbor. It's because they've realized that true wealth comes from that spiritual living. Now, that doesn't mean we don't all deserve to have a home and whatever, but I think that's part of God's monetary provision as we seek him spiritually. And so we're all here to work together to move forward. And I think we're all on our own journey. But when we try to define some of those things or try to express those things, I am glad that I don't understand God. Because if I was God, we'd all be in trouble. Because y'all would understand what I'm saying. You'd all know what I mean. And you would all know that it's self-serving. And so I'm grateful that I have a God that I don't necessarily understand, but I can trust. So anyway, I don't know if any of that made sense, but thank you for letting me ramble.
No, it totally makes sense. And I think it's really good to hear as well, and I do get that, but I think that the part of it is that we're also still we're still on earth too. So it's like that weird balance of we can understand and we can sort of live in our bliss with God, but there also is an element of also still needing to be present and showing up in a world and with people that might not be experiencing God in the same way.
I think I think that's a great thought. So how are some things because right now we're in a time in our history, soon to be history, that's unprecedented. Yeah. We're all kind of quarantined inside our homes, or we've had some huge shakeups in our lives over the last year. So how is it that we can be present, not for ourselves? How is it we can be present for our neighbor? Because I think that's an opportunity there to make change. That's an opportunity for us to be God's hands and feet and allow people to experience spiritually the love that God is. Mm-hmm. So let's throw that out there. I'm happy to share some of my thoughts, some of the things I want to do, some things I can do that I haven't been doing. I'm sure you are. What about you guys out there? Is there something that we can do tangibly, individually, or even as together that we can do to honor those around us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're just thinking about the term, or if we're thinking about just the topic of fear, which I think is in a lot of ways probably feeding a lot of what is happening or what ails us in the world today, I think fear probably is a big part of that. Like, what are people afraid of? They're afraid of losing something, maybe. They're afraid of, I don't know what it is that they're afraid of, but I feel like there's fear. And if God said, I liked when you said, fear not. Yeah. That's often what like the angels said, and things like that when things were happening. So I feel like that would be our call, is to approach and be with people in that fear not state. So in a way of potentially helping folks to not be afraid.
Yeah. And what does that look like tangibly?
I know. Well,
that's I think what we're all tasked with every day. What does that look like tangibly?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways it's really hard because I don't think that we don't have a lot of power over people, and fear can potentially play a role a little bit in people making change and doing things. So I feel like it can have a function, and a part of that is like what's your place in somebody else's experience. And so I feel like probably the way in the fear nots is to be able to, I guess, share and show what it's like to live in without fear in maybe those places in which other people are experiencing fear.
I think that's good. It's easy for us, and I'm not trying to be, like I said, confrontational. I just want us to have a
Yeah,
conversation
totally.
that's viable. It's easy for us to talk about all this. It's easy for us to talk about all these spiritual things. But something I've learned is that we need to take action on some of this. And now I have to be honest, I'm not agreeable to all the actions that I've seen over the last couple of years, but I believe that there needs to be action taken. And I think there's action that we can take individually as people, for even if it's just a few people around us that we're comfortable with, that can help us overcome fears. For those of us, as we get more comfortable, I think there's bigger steps that we can take. But I want us to stop thinking about our personal fears. And I remember one of the Bible teacher that I respect.
Stacy says hi to both of us. Hey, Stacy. I just want to say hey real quick. It looks like somebody froze for a minute.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what you could and couldn't hear, so I'm just going to keep going. But sometimes you just got to do something afraid. And so I encourage everybody out there. Now, I'm not saying do something crazy and go down a dark alley because you're scared of it in the middle of the night. I'm saying do something that you're scared of. You know, like I know a lot of people are afraid to hug people. Now, don't go hug everybody that you don't know, but be willing to hug someone maybe that you know that you feel like they're okay and that they just need an embrace. You know, do reach out to someone that maybe you haven't talked to in a while, like you did for me. Let's reach out and let's make a connection with something. Do it afraid. And let's overcome some of these fears. Mm-hmm. Because if we can start to break these fears, we can create an opportunity where love can exist. We can bring that shalom, that peace, do not fear, into the life that we have with the people around us. We just have to be willing to take those steps.
Yeah.
And they can be baby steps. It's fine, but we have to be willing to move forward.
To have courage.
That's exactly right.
Courage is when you're afraid, but you keep on moving anyway.
That's exactly right.
You know, it doesn't mean you're without fear. It just means that you pursue, you keep going.
Yeah, you're persevering. You keep going.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So awesome. Trace, Stacy, how are you? Good to see you back up online here.
Definitely. What I was trying to think, one of the things that came to me when we were talking about fear that I think sometimes is still kind of there is this idea of like maybe a fear of death. I think my relationship with fear around death has, it's changed over the years. I remember, when I was diagnosed with HIV, I was really young. I was 19, 20 when I found out. And like, I recall even saying to myself that I wasn't really afraid of dying itself. I was afraid of doing whatever it was that I wanted to do before I died. So I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to do that. And then I was really scared of what the process of dying would be for me as a person living with HIV. Would I start to lose my sight? Would I start to lose my mind? Would I start to lose parts of my body? Will I, become, like those were the things that I was more afraid of than I think death itself.
Dying. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
How did you work through all that?
It was really hard. I think it's just like with most things, it's like time and experience. I remember, and I missed out on a lot because I was afraid. I remember I would go to, when I first went to the doctor's office, and I just was I had a really hard time accepting what was going on. And because I just didn't know a lot, I just expected to die. And it felt like the more I knew, the scarier it was that somehow ignorance or not knowing more was like less scary. I used to wear the same clothes when I went to the doctor for the first while of my HIV. After being diagnosed with HIV, I would wear the same clothes, which was a pair of bib overalls. which were kind of in style at that time, but also I think for me, they made me feel very kid-like or very kind of safe for some reason. I just kind of felt safe. And so I always wore those overalls, and I always I had this yellow backpack, and I called it my backpack of death. And I would put it on my back, and I would go to my doctor's appointment, and the doctors would give me all this sort of information, and I would just put it in that bag and then take it home and throw it in the closet. And, you know, the next week or whenever I had to go back to the doctor again, I would just grab that bag and go. And like, it took me a long time to actually, like, metaphorically, if you will, to open up that bag and to like really look at all there was to know about my situation and what was going on. And
I'm so sorry you had to walk through that without us.
It was an experience that it's just what I went through. And yeah, it was pretty intense. I remember I was pretty scared, and I was not like I think most people would assume I'm kind of a pleasant, nice, kind of like maybe charismatic, kind of quiet though. But when I went to the doctor's appointments, that was not me. I was very in myself. I was no eye contact, I was just very like afraid, and I remember a nurse trying to console me or trying to help me comfortable with where I was. And I remember she said, isn't it so great that like everybody here is just like you? Like it's an HIV clinic, so everybody here has HIV. Doesn't that feel great? And I was like, no, because like I'm looking around and I'm seeing people at different levels of having the disease. I'm seeing people walk around with IV bags and walkers, and I was like, hell no, that's not helpful. Actually, this is scaring the shit out of me, because this is way too much. Yeah, it's way too real. And I really feel like that's why drugs became a part of my life. It's just it was just so much to take in that I just couldn't take it all in at once. And I had to kind of like, I don't know. It was an intense time, but I guess I'm all the better for it on the other end.
What a wonderful testimony to share with someone who may not understand, or who may be walking through a similar situation, maybe not with HIV, but with something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think we all have those moments in life where we, and yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I would have wished I could have had at that time was to not be so alone in it. I felt super isolated and alone, but I think again, that's part of the process. I think for a lot of things, it's like the more you talk about something and the more that you're with others with it, it just becomes more and more real. And so I think I was afraid of the truth for a really long time, and really, and it's not even really the truth, because of the truth, the whole truth is like, it doesn't really all matter that much, like.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. That's interesting to bring up truth. That pursuit of truth, in the long run, it sounds like it set you free. And gaining some understanding, during the time of HIV, and I'm thinking, man, we're kind of going through a space of unknownness with a new disease that we're all trying to figure out. Nobody really knew what was going on. From my perspective, on my side of it, there people were just like, afraid of it. They're afraid to be around people who had it. They didn't understand what they were supposed to do, or if they could get it. I mean, it was just ridiculous looking back on it. During the middle of it, all those fears were valid, because no one really knew. No one really had any experience to share.
Yeah, I feel like that's sometimes interesting how our response to, like, because the thing that changed that fear was we learned more. Right. We came to understand more. We learned actually how it was transmitted. We learned how to protect ourselves from it. We learned how to deal with it better when we did have it. So it was like, it actually, the more we looked at it, the more we sat with it, the actual less scary it became. But it was interesting that it was fear that was keeping us from from that, you know?
Yeah, the truth. Yeah. But once you understood the truth of what was happening, then you could actually respond.
Yeah. Or even if, yeah. And the truth is just a fuller, I think just having a more of the story, I guess, more of the information was kind of that truth, I guess.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's an amazing testimony. Thanks for sharing with all of us.
Yeah. And just in kind of thinking about that, I think it still kind of plays out. And it's just something to kind of think about. Is there still places in my life where I am afraid, which there is, my transness, I'm afraid to talk with my parents about it, like, and it's like, it's like, where is that coming from? I have some of my own fears. And again, it's because I don't understand everything fully. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how people are going to respond or how things are going to play out or even how I am. So I'm wondering how I can kind of like take that experience from then to try to like help me be more willing to kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dig in.
Move forward. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. I think your parents would like to have that conversation with you.
Yeah.
And you just have to be ready that, and I think this is something that we all have to do, especially when we're moving forward in things. It's like you're taking a step, you're going to have a conversation. You have to be ready for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And pray that that's not the case.
Yeah. And that's really what I've had to let go of is that like, but I had to be okay with it. I had to be okay with whatever response that was. But I did get to like Grandma Violet, your mom, I send out those postcards to a few of my folks and I signed it Bonnie Violet as a way to start that conversation or to just kind of put it out there without having to make it a thing or like a big meeting where we talk or, I don't know.
Yeah.
I got to talk with Grandma and she called me and
Was this recent?
Yeah, it was.
Because I can never get a hold of her.
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, she called me. It wasn't this week, but the week before. But she called me and she's like, I just wanted to. And it was weird. She called me and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to answer it. It's like, girl, why wouldn't you answer it? So I went ahead and I answered it. And she was just like, hello, how are you doing? We were chit chatting. And, she loves that she's where she's at in the home. And I know we had a lot of fear about that situation. And
we did.
And she's really just seems to be loving it and really enjoying it. And I said, so did you get my postcard? And she said, yeah, there was like with the glitter, there's glitter everywhere. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, I think glitter runs in our family, actually.
Definitely. Right. Well, and so I told her, I was like, well, did you notice that I signed the postcard Bonnie Violet? And she said, yeah. And I said, that's my name now. That's the name that I go by all the time. Like, that's my name now. And she goes, oh, well, okay. That was it. She's like, okay, all right. And then I told her why, because I named myself after her, and I shared with her that experience of why I chose my name and, those sorts of things. And so it was actually, it was nothing I needed to be afraid of.
Yeah.
And it worked out really, nice.
That's awesome. And I'm guessing you'll have a similar experience with your parents.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think it's those situations where I don't know if they're waiting for me or if, I think sometimes you feel like you need to have permission to ask certain questions and it's coming from a good place.
Yeah. Talking to parents is hard. It's hard. And I think it's hard for them just as much as it is for us, because the relationship changes so much from us being taken care of by them and being raised up by them to becoming adults. And then as my parents have gotten older, that role changing to us taking care of them and different things. So those conversations are not easy. And I used to have such a hard time, and I love my dad. I was a daddy's girl my whole life. And when it came down to some of those hard conversations, oh my goodness, they were so hard. And especially if he was resistant to a conversation. there's more times than once that he'd say, I raised you better than that, or who do you think you are talking to me like that, or whatever. Here, I'm an adult trying to have an adult conversation about something that I thought would be important to them. And in the long run, it was. But in that moment, oh, those are some hard conversations.
Yeah.
But I encourage you to have them, because just prepare yourself, like I said, for the worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. And decide if you can live with that, and if how you might respond to that, and then just pray for the best case. And it usually lands somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And it's so hard because I just feel like there's been so much healing for myself when I'm able to just be real about what's going on and not have any judgment. And it's like there's a part of me that wants that with my family as well. And I think in order for me to continue, maybe in some way, it would be great if we were able to do that together. And there's progress being made. There definitely is. It's happening.
We have to make sure that we don't put sometimes this acceptance of who we think we are, who we want to be, as a responsibility for someone else. Right. They can accept us or not accept us. We have to make sure that in our pursuit for Christ, that we're following his lead and following along with what he says, and we're living the life that he declares for us. And sometimes people around us don't necessarily agree with all that. And I think sometimes people are trying to guide us with a good intent, but don't understand fully. Yeah. And so we're taking that as a negative, when in their heart it's a positive, and it's just not communicating well.
Right. Well, I'm like, I have no clue what their experience is and what they're experiencing. Like they could be, quote unquote, in the same headspace, if you will, but it plays out in a different way. Like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I know that an experience I have and you have, like if we both were in a car accident right now, our experience with that would be very different. And how it played out in our, like, even if we both ended up losing a limb through that process, how we respond to that and how that impacted us is going to be different for like a number of different things. And that doesn't mean that, I don't know. And I think we learn things differently. We experience and feel things differently in different ways.
Yeah.
Because of different experiences. Like, I don't know.
It's amazing to me how uniquely we're each created. But as God places us in the household that he does and in the locations that he does, how together we're woven. You know what I mean? It's like the fine lines behind the big picture. Mm-hmm. The big pictures are different, but some of those fine lines in the background are the same. And it's amazing to me. But we have to remember that in search of our big picture, that we don't lose track of the fine lines, or we don't try to alter someone else's big picture.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes in an attempt to figure out who we are, we want to, I'm guilty of this, that we want someone else to change and be like us, or to understand that the way that we understand it because we experienced this. Now I have a testimony, you have a testimony. They're intertwined, foundationally the same, but they're different. You know what I mean? And I think it's when we try to have that same, let me give you an example. I think it's the best way for everyone to understand it. Because I'm a mature Christian woman, I read my Bible regularly. And sometimes when I read my Bible, I'll think, oh my goodness, I'll get an idea, or I call it a prompting from the Holy Spirit. And I'll write that down. I try to apply that to my life. Well, then I'll go to my friend's house and we're sharing, and I'm sharing this amazing thing with them. And then I wonder why it doesn't affect them the way it affects me. Mm. And I'm like, oh, no, you don't understand. It's got to be like this. Yeah. And for me to say, you don't get it if you don't get it the way I get it is wrong.
Yep. Yeah.
They need to be able to read it, process it, and apply it the way the word is the fine line there is the same, but the application on how it is can be different.
Right.
And I think we experience that culturally here on a regular basis, that everyone wants us to all fit into this one mold, that it's all the same and it has to be this way, and it's not. Yeah. We all have a different big picture.
Yeah, well, and I think in some ways we have to ask ourselves, like somewhere we think we're better than them, or maybe we know something more than, do you know what I mean? Know something more. And I just don't know that that's always true. Isaac has a comment. Isaac says, one of the great lessons I've learned is to trace my fears to the root of their voice, to ask the question, is this my fear, or is this an inheritance? A voice from my parents, family, society, etc., disguised as my own.
That's good. I think that's good.
It's really good.
Thanks for sharing that, Isaac. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, those are like, right. I think that kind of even leads to our first, like one of our first comments about the conspiracy or whatever of fear. It's like, is that, or false evidence appearing real? Like, where is this coming from? Is this my fear? Is this your fear? Is this a fear that was placed on me, or was things told to me or put on me in a way that's, created it in me?
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of in Genesis when Eve ate the apple and Adam and Eve were hiding from God as he walked through the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And when they finally came out, he says, why were you hiding? And Adam says, because we're naked. And God said to them, who told you that? And I feel like that's a question I ask myself every day. If I'm anxious or if I'm afraid or whatever, who told me that? I know who I am in Christ. I know the plans and the purposes God has for my life. So who told me that? So when Isaac shared that wisdom, that's kind of where it took me. You're right. I need to be asking myself, who told me that? Is this something I should really be afraid of? Or is it something that I shouldn't be afraid of?
Right. So is a function of God to cause us not to fear? I don't know. Like, is God our protector, I guess, or our?
Absolutely. The Bible says the battle's not ours, it's his. So we just need to let him fight it for us. We don't always do that. Yeah.
Well, but I think there's also an element of like, it's not real.
What do you mean it's not
like
real?
It's not like, this is like, who told you you're naked? Like God doesn't think you're naked, or God doesn't care. Like it's not a thing.
Right.
I think it's in the same way of like when church tells you that you're going to hell because you're gay, or because you had premarital sex, or because like for whatever reason, like they're telling you that you are not worthy for God.
And that's not their place to say
you
that.
Should have fear of God, or you should have fear of hell, or you should have fear of whatever.
Godly fear is different than the fear I think that we're talking about on day-to-day life. To me, a fear of God is a reverence as to who he is and the authority that he has. It's not a fear of his love for us, a fear of how he interacts with us. It's a reverence of who he is. God doesn't want anyone to go to hell. He would not, and only God knows our heart. What we wear on the outside of our body doesn't matter.
Yeah.
God knows our heart. And who am I to judge your heart? Who are you to judge my heart?
Yeah.
All we can do is love one another where we're at, encourage one another the best way that we can towards the purposes and the things that God's outlined in his word. And I don't know, move forward. I just want to love my neighbor. I have so much to learn about that. Just loving my neighbor. I've lived in this house here in Arizona for 15 plus years. And not only in the last, 3 or 4 years, do I know the names of all my neighbors. Shame on me. And it's not because they changed.
Right.
It's like, oh my goodness, how is it that I can live in this area and not know who my neighbor is? Someone could be in their house and I would think it was them and I wouldn't even know because I don't even know who they are. Yeah. And that's a literal, but that was what I needed. I introduced myself to all my neighbors. And now we live in a space where people say hello to each other. People talk to one another. We share abundance with one another. My neighbor across the street, she's newer to our community. She brought me over fresh tamales. It's like, yay. You know, she wouldn't have done that 15 years ago because she wouldn't have known my name or if I liked Mexican food.
Right.
So, you know, this is just a basic foundational thing that can move us in those spaces where there's no fear. I was scared to talk to my neighbors. I don't know why. They didn't do anything to me.
Right.
So anyway, my 2 cents.
Stacy says, absolutely, Tina. We are like right at almost the hour mark, which, you know, I don't like to edit. So I like to before 60 minutes. But yeah, I was thinking about like, because I believe that I am created and continue to be created in God's image in a way in which maybe can change the world, like a part of changing that world. And I don't know, it was something that kind of came up with that idea around fearing God, or people telling you that you're not, you know, like you're not worthy or whatever, or you're going to hell, that sort of thing. I'm totally losing my train of thought right now. I should just shut up. But thanks everybody for joining us today. It was great to interact with you all. Really great comments and thoughts. Hopefully you heard something that was helpful to you as well, or thought-provoking. If something was, you know, think about maybe somebody else who might benefit from hearing this conversation today, and you know, consider sending them you know, a copy of this if you feel so inclined. I know I always have to get to that place, right? Oh, Stacy says, Bonnie, talk to your family and free yourself.
Amen. So I just have a random thought to close us out today.
Yes.
So think about this. Are you managing your fear, or is your fear managing you? Because there's a difference. Happy Monday, everybody. Enjoy your week.
Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Play that outro.
Splintered Grace Podcast is brought to you by A Queer Chaplain. Follow us on all of our social medias, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at A Queer Chaplain. Listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, comment, like, and share. Feel free to tip us at Venmo, Bonnie Violet, and support monthly on Patreon. The song is original by Steven Sandnoff, The Chasm Between Us. Rest in peace, Steven. Hey, how's it going? Bonnie Violet here. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and digital chaplain. And in case you didn't know, I could really use your support. Engage, rate, subscribe, follow, comment, share this episode, book me to keynote, panel, guest on your show, or officiate your wedding or memorial, in or out of drag, collaborate, join the team, be a guest, make a pitch, sponsor an episode, join my Patreon, send me a tip on Venmo or PayPal. Just do something. Thank you so much for your continued support. Check out the links in the description.